Saab isn't exactly a household name anymore in the car world, nor was it ever one even when they were in business right up until 2016. In America, at least, they always sort of existed as a curious vehicle choice for those who couldn't conform to the status quo, no matter the decade. In the 1960s, the British sports car craze that included the MGB and the Triumph TR4 was in full swing. America was becoming enamored by these agile and lively lightweight platforms. These foreign roadsters were a massive step away from the horsepower war that the big three were waging, and so choosing a compact four-cylinder sports car was already pushing back against that status quo. But for those who wanted something even more unique, surprisingly, it was Saab who had the answer. The same people who made sedans that looked like this had decided to build their own lightweight sports car, tipping the scales at less than 2,000 pounds and being powered by one of the angriest sounding engines of all time. Saab's creation is one of the most fascinating cars of the era, the Saab Sonnet. The origins of the Saab Sonnet trace back to the 1950s, when a group of Saab engineers and racing enthusiasts, led by Rolf Meld, designed the initial two-seat roadster prototype for the brand, on an absolute shoestring budget. Created in a barn near Saab's manufacturing hub in Sweden, this car was initially dubbed the Saab 9-4, which was the logical number to follow the current Saab 9-3. It was later renamed the Sonnet, inspired by the Swedish phrase, which I cannot pronounce, but I'll put on the screen, which means how neat it is. This would end up becoming the going name for the car itself from this point on. And this first Saab Sonnet was an absolute featherweight, tipping the scale at just 1,200 pounds thanks to its aircraft-inspired lightweight aluminum chassis that was riveted together in many places to provide the strength that it needed. Visually, the Saab Sonnet 1 was a clean contemporary sports car that clearly drew styling inspiration from cars like the Porsche 356 Speedster and period Alfa Romeos. It just wasn't quite as elegant, but you could see where the inspiration came from. But in the case of the Saab, the body was actually made from fiberglass, something that Saab themselves were not accustomed to using. Given the budget constraints that the car had, much of the suspension and drivetrain segments of the first Saab Sonnets had to be lifted from the existing production line at Saab, which meant using the powertrain from the Saab 9-3 and 9-6, because in a rather unusual fashion for a sports car, the Sonnet was front-wheel drive. And this engine was a 748cc inline 3-cylinder that was actually a two-stroke motor of all things, which made the Saab Sonnet sound more like a bike than it did a car. Peak power was 57 horsepower, and torque sat right around 60 foot-pounds. This first little Sonnet was light, tossable, and was a jaw-dropping iteration for the brand given the current styling of their cars. Once unveiled at the Stockholm Motor Show in 1956, the Saab Sonnet was a hit. Sadly though, only 6 cars were ever built in the prototype phase, before the Sonnet project took a break to prioritize Saab's production efforts on their sedans. But that was not the end of the Sonnet. In fact, things were just about to get interesting. By 1966, the Sonnet would make a Shakespearean return with the fully redesigned Saab Sonnet 2. Gone was the old Roadster design. The new Sonnet was now designed as a sleek little fastback with a large glass rear window that always seems to remind me of the one on the 65 to 66 Plymouth Barracudas. The large glass on the back of the Sonnet now led to an abruptly cut off camback rear, which helped to accentuate the body lines by minimizing the rear overhang. The front end of the Saab Sonnet 2 was also modernized more, with the headlights now being recessed into the fenders and having a slightly more angular front end. Overall, these new Sonnets had what was very evidently a more thorough and congruent design than the Series 1 prototype cars, because now they actually had a real budget to put towards developing them. Make no mistake though, with all these changes, These new Saab Sonnets were still really tiny. With a wheelbase of just 85 inches and an overall length of just 148 inches, the Saab Sonnet was a full 10 inches shorter than the MGB, and it was around the same length as the Triumph Spitfire. The Saab Sonnet 2 maintained the ethos from the first car and used a majority of off-the-shelf Saab parts where they could, but it was a totally different car underneath compared to the Sonnet 1. With independent suspension front and rear, the Sonnet 2 was actually well equipped to tackle the turns and gradually pull away from them with its newly revised 2-stroke inline-3. Now, the 750cc motor was punched out to 841cc, which bumped peak power to 60 horsepower. Still not a ton, but with the full production-ready Sonnet 2 weighing in at just 1,500 pounds, it was still more than enough to get the car to over 100 miles per hour if you could wait long enough. Couple that with the added drama of the 2-stroke engine with 3 carbs on it, and the driving experience that you got with the Sonnet was something truly unique, especially when shifting through that 4-speed manual transaxle that was a column shift. Saab's full intentions were to take the Sonnet 2 to the American market, which was proving to be an exceptionally lucrative market for sports cars, as I mentioned. Although the biggest challenge that Saab ran into selling the Sonnet 2 in America wasn't the price or the car itself really, it was the power plant. A 2-stroke engined car may have sold fine in Sweden, where Saab had a strong foothold, but in America that was just a recipe for slow sales. Just 258 Saab Sonnet 2s were built with the inline-3 before Saab made the hard pivot to use an existing 4-stroke motor to try and increase the broad appeal for the car. The challenge with that, though, was finding a motor that would fit in the tiny engine bay of the Sonnet. Most inline-4s would be too long, and a V6 would obviously be too big, which left Saab with really only one existing engine option: the V4 Ford Taunus engine. This motor was designed for the Ford Cardinal economy car project that ended up falling through, but it then made its way into various European Ford products, but never any offerings stateside. This little 1.5-liter V4, being a normal 4-stroke engine, eliminated the need for Saab owners to do any oil and gas mixing for the 2-stroke, thus making the ease of ownership experience a lot better. Peak power was now 65 horsepower with the 1.5-liter V4 under the hood, 5 horsepower more than the inline-3. But the real gains were actually in the much fatter torque curve that came from the larger displacement motor, which made the V4-powered Sonnets more engaging in the lower RPMs than it was prior. And although the new motor was heavier and offered a much different driving experience, the added livability of the V4-powered cars was generally a well-received change. These new cars were all dubbed the Sonnet V4, and as expected, the introduction of a more normal engine did help with sales considerably. 1,600 units of the Sonnet V4 were sold from 1967 to 1969, with prices in the US starting at around $3,200. By 1970, the executives at Saab, though, felt that the Sonnet needed a new facelift to keep it competitive with some of the new design language that manufacturers were incorporating. As a result, these V4 Sonnets were reimagined for a third and final time. These new Sonnets were a relatively inexpensive facelift from a production standpoint because most of the underpinnings were the same as the later V4 Sonnets from the late 60s. The quarter panels and core lines of the car stayed pretty much the same except for the front end, which got a full redesign that doubled down on its angularity. Gone were the recessed headlights, and in their place were a set of pop-up lights that sat above the new full-width grille that housed the fog lights. The rounded rear glass was replaced for a more practical to produce flat piece of fastback rear glass that was now also hinged for easy access to throw your luggage onto the parcel shelf. This was a nice quality of life update that also undoubtedly reduced the exorbitant cost to produce that old style rear glass. The 1.5-liter Ford V4 remained under the hood, albeit it was now slightly less powerful given the emissions regulation changes. But by 1972, the Sonnet got fitted with the upgraded 1.7-liter version of that very motor, which brought peak power back to 65 horsepower. Performance in terms of the 0 to 60 time was around 13 seconds, and it could complete the quarter mile in about 18 seconds. The Sonnet obviously was not a fast car, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in fun. The Sonnet 3 specifically was a car that you could use every ounce of power out of on public roads and not get in trouble. The Sonnet 3s specifically made the switch to an updated interior that had a nicer dash than its predecessor, but more importantly, the shifter was now moved to a floor-shifted 4-speed, which greatly increased the fun factor. Road and Track praised the Sonnet 3 in their review of it for its fun driving experience and balanced handling, even though the car had a 60-40 front weight distribution. But they felt that some aspects of the car did leave a little bit to be desired. The serviceability of the engine was a challenge with the new redesign, and some of the touch points like the clutch, the brakes, and the shifter just weren't up to par with some of the great pluses of the Sonnet, like its communicative steering. Nonetheless, the Saab Sonnet 3 was a step in the right direction, it seemed. Sales were also considerably better than they were for the Sonnet 2s. However, with the gas crisis in America making its ugly head known around 1973, coupled with the new mandate for US crash bumpers, the Sonnet story took a turn for the worst. The large impact bumpers added to the Sonnet added considerably more weight to the car, and now the curb weight sat around 1,900 pounds, further hampering performance. Sales began to fall off a cliff, and by 1974, Saab decided to pull the plug on the Sonnet. Now, there were plans to bring it back, but they never materialized. In total, just over 8,000 Saab Sonnet 3s were built, which brought the total production run of all Sonnet cars up to just over 10,000 units. These were quirky cars, there's really no other way to say it. It took a very specific kind of buyer to purchase one of these over any British roadster or any other sports car at the time. But 10,000 people did, thankfully, which is why I can even make this video. For such a rare car, these actually are pretty inexpensive as well. One look on Bring a Trailer can show you that these cars are still definitely affordable by the average person in terms of a collectible. The question is though, would you take one of these over an MG or an old Alpha Spider? Let me know in the comments down below. And thank you all for watching another video. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out. But otherwise, until next time, enthusiasts.